Okay, well, we're all fully tensioned, the rifle's on, the scope's on, it's nice and straight. The next step in the process would be a bubble level. Now I'm not going to set one up on this simply because until I get it here, I've got another one which is similar to this one here, and that's really how I would mount it up. I prefer to put them there. You can obviously, well, stop waving that around, and you can put them forward, you can put them back, but, and with this situation, if I was going to try and shoot it, I would use one of these. This is a US Optics, but what I'm essentially talking about is a rail mounted bubble level. And whether you're using the bubble or using a ceramic ball, I don't really like the ceramic balls. Are a bit slow moving and not quite as fine to look at as the bubble. I prefer the bubbles, but that's your choice. But this is when I know my rifle is straight, I know this point is straight, I know everything's straight on it. But this is the point where I make sure the bubble level, even the rail mounts that just bolt on, this is the point to get it straight. And yes, the rail mounts tend to not be perfect, they tend to be shimming in one way or other, but to make sure they're dead straight, and this is the time to verify it. Right now is when I verify it. So let's imagine I've done that for this process. I'm not going to pretend I don't have it here, but that's exactly what I do. And of course, I can swap around, move it, and I can simply go to the fact that I've got everything straight to start off with. Okay, so that's that bit. The next bit I go through is zeroing. Very simple process. I do bore sighting to start off with, so I take my bolt out, pull that off, pull the bolt out, and then I actually have outside this window actually a little reflector on a post at just over 50 yards away, about a 2-inch round reflector. And what I do, I use my adjustable bag base so I can adjust it on at the back here, but I then sight through the barrel, get the front and the barrel exactly lined up and the reflector right in the middle of it. Then, scope caps up, I go through and adjust my reticle to get the center of it, actually go through and center that on is my starting point. And what I found at 50 yards, I want to have my reticle 1.5 inches over the center of that, approximately 1.5 inches, inch to 1.5 inches, depending on the combination, over the top of the center line of where I've got the bore pointing. That works out in the angles and all that sort of stuff. Really, all we're trying to do is get on paper, so that then you can go to the range 100 yards and do your adjusting and get on paper. That's a fairly simple process. Obviously you shoot and you correct and shoot and correct, and then you're setting zero stops and you're setting your zeroing and all that sort of stuff. It all happens in a straightforward process, and that's a mounted scope. There is another step for the guys who wanted to go that level further and get things super accurate and verify your scope, verify your straightness of the scope is the main thing I'm talking about, and that's a tall target test. The tall target test is quite simple. I won't get too complicated about it, but largely I would tend to do it at 50 yards, set up a 6-foot high target at 50 yards. So whether it's cardboard boxes or whatever it is, I want to end up with a straight piece of wood, something dead straight, and I set it up with a plumb bob so that I have a dead straight line that is, I said 50 yards, I'd want a 6-foot high straight line. If you do the maths, you're after 50 inches to do 100 MOA of adjustment, or approximately 30 mil of adjustment. You need 6 inches. You have a target, a center dot that you're aiming at the bottom, and then you can mark it off, do your maths and mark it off all the way up to however high you're going. At this thing I'm talking about 100 minutes of elevation, and then you can dial up whatever your target set at, you dial up, you shoot, you dial up, you shoot till you get right to the top. You should have shots that are going dead straight up that line, and in verifying both your reticle and your turrets, they should be on where you've worked out where those measurements should be. I won't go past that point trying to explain that, because the tall target test can be a little problematic. You need to have the thinker switched on when you're doing it. You need to be shooting your perfect group to get the perfect result. So if you aren't pulling off a really good group, then you're not validating it, not because anything's wrong here, it's because it's wrong here. If you have different wind conditions when you shoot in a closed range, but there is wind that's different 6 foot high than there is wind at 1 foot high, okay, then that can be causing different bits and pieces. And it's something, in truth, I don't do a lot. I tend to find that the shooting up straight, setting them up with the levels works really well for me, and I verify that by going out and shooting. And to be honest, I just haven't had the problem. I think many years ago I did, where a rifle was shooting, the more elevation I screwed in, it was shooting more right than it should have been, than the wind made sense of, and okay, it was actually because there was something, the scope wasn't set up properly. But largely I find my two little levels do the job properly. Listen, that's once you've done all that, but you are then doing it. I should say with the tall target test, it's fun to do. It's a good test to do. It's good trigger time. It makes you think, it makes you shoot, all that sort of stuff. So it's a good test to go through anyway, but it's not essential in my opinion. Listen, that's about it. What would I say? The bits that, I suppose the last bit I would do is I like to go back and check tensions again. I don't tend to find anything moving, but I don't feel it's a waste of time to go through and check things. One of the most common things that goes wrong, all of a sudden my rifle's not shooting properly, is something's come loose. Done properly it shouldn't do, but shouldn't, isn't, couldn't. So it means that checking is just a really good idea, and occasionally going back through and checking your action screws, checking your rail screws, checking all that sort of stuff is a good thing to do just as a matter of habit. Torque wrench, super important. If you don't got a torque wrench, get a torque wrench. Doesn't need to be a fat wrench, needs to be a torque wrench. The adjustment in your elbow, in your wrist, whatever it is not good enough. Now, listen, that might be that you think it is, and maybe you've got away with it for lots and lots of years. But the more I speak to gunsmiths that deal with problems, and scope people deal with problems, over tension and under tension is a big deal here. A lot of people doing it. So the simple thing is, it's a good practice. It also allows for your strong days, your weak days, your bad days, your good days. It's all answered by adjusting this thing and clicking, rather than just using the tension wrench in the wrist. So totally suggest that. In the way of tools, listen, Loctite, I certainly would recommend, definitely on the rail. I think it's a good idea. A lot of people don't. Equally, there's problems in that place as well. So it's the thing I would recommend and go with. As for how you do it, whether it's straight edges, you do need a level of some form or other. A plumb bob is a good thing to have, simple enough to make, a piece of string with something heavy hanging off it, hung up in the air. Straight edges, that's a pretty simple process for people who don't have much of it, and it can also means that in some places trying to get access to places can be made easier with a thin straight piece of metal than it can be to get some of your spirit levels. And I think the last bit I'd cover with is, listen, I suppose the dual, mono and dual, when you go to two-piece rings, good quality stuff largely answers it, but you should be checking straightness of them. When you've got expensive gear on there and it's doing a lot of work, you should be checking them. Largely you'll get away with it. With the better quality stuff, the less an issue, but there is pretty simple tools, not very expensive tools you can get to check alignment or to lap and to make out your two-piece stuff. I don't tend to bother with it. I like the mono stuff, but I've got this extra extra proviso of going for my adjustable base, which is about ELR, and I suppose where I'd like to stay and come back to at the finish of this. What I'm always trying to get, if I possibly can, I want to get at least 150 minutes of elevation in my combination. I used to just be the 120, and I did a lot with the uni mounts, the 40 MOA rail set up in your Remington 700s, and you can in the Howers and that sort of stuff, a lot of that sort of thing, but certainly it does come back to getting at least half your elevation, half your internal elevation, so you can use your scope properly. It's a very common problem I bang into of people saying, oh, but I've got this scope, I've got that, but I can only shoot out so far, simply because they don't have enough internal elevation, and that really comes down to the first choice of the rail to start off with. Anyway, I think that's about it. That's a mounted scope. That's how we use them. That's why we use them. There's lots of choices here, and I don't want to steer in any direction that is outside of where you need it to be, but this is what we do. I hope that was of value to some people. And listen, guys, if you like what we do, please subscribe, like and share the video, that side of things. If you can help us, and we don't get anything from YouTube, so if you can help us, that would be really great. There's ways to donate to us. There's our web store where we sell components. We now have merchandise. We have shirts that you can buy, and we're trying to get more into that sort of stuff. Ways to try and help us keep building these videos and keep bringing this stuff to you. But yeah, listen, I hope you liked it. Thanks for checking in on us. I'll catch you next time.